Hello and welcome to Quick Take TA here on Landy's Crypto Corner. Today is April 4th, 2024, and we are looking at Bitcoin today. We're going to start out with the 12-hour time frame because there is some pretty important things going on here as it relates to the daily. Now, Bitcoin did meet the breakdown criteria to go test $65,000. If you recall from a few videos ago, I had been talking about this wick low of the topside consolidation above $69,000 or the prior all-time high. And if we saw that wick low get taken out on any kind of a 4 or 6 hour closure, that our next big target to the downside would be the April of 2021 monthly swing high at $65,000. And we did see that occur. Now, the last video I had spoken about if $65,000 were to break down, then and only then on something like a 4 or 6 hour could we be looking lower. But if Bitcoin did hold $65,000, I would be looking back up to the top side of this zone around $69,000. Now, technically, I was looking around 67,500 to 700 where the daily basis band was to around $69,000. We did see moves to both of those areas in the lower term timeframes, but Bitcoin did end up closing just below the $69,000 level on the daily and, of course, the previous 12-hour candle as well. Now, why am I looking at the 12-hour candles? Because this is going to inform what we're going to see in terms of the next move for Bitcoin, at least as it relates to this range. If Bitcoin can trade above the basis band of the 12-hour Bollinger Band set here, which is right at $69,000, and then, of course, get above its local wick high here at around $69,367, then I would be looking for it to try up for the top side or middle of this consolidation, somewhere around 70,500 to that upper first by $71,000. Above there, of course, I would start to look for the wick highs to get tested around $71,800 to $72,000. Now, I wouldn't necessarily be looking for expansion to the highs and higher until I saw a 12-hour closure above the upper second standard deviation. This is a little bit higher than this consolidation on the lower term time frames before the push to new highs, around $72,000. This is actually coming in at roughly $72,640 or so. Now, if Bitcoin can start getting closures above there, it's likely already testing the all-time high area around 73 to 73,835. And if Bitcoin starts to close above there and the upper second standard deviation on the 12-hour, we would see expansion to the upside, targeting somewhere around $75,000 to $78,000. Above there, we've talked about this before. I typically show it during my live streams. Maybe we'll pull a fib today, but above there, 78 to 80, and then into the mid to low 80s from there, and then we come back to it. Now, if Bitcoin does head the other way and test this $65,000 area again, by the lower second standard deviation and begin to close below it and specifically lose the wick lows around 64,500, then I would be looking for expansion down into some of the support areas, specifically around 63,800 by this higher low close to the wick low somewhere around 62,250 to 62,500. And then, of course, below there, then I would start looking for a run of this big quarterly and monthly closing zone around 61,350 at the monthly to the monthly and quarterly around 58.8 from March of 2021 and October of 2021 respectively. So that's where I would look for an actual closure on the 12-hour, maybe a 4 hours front runnable below $65,000 that would kick off expansion if the 12-hour started to close down below there. And of course, lose the wick lows. That's the other conditional element of this, would be at 64,500 on any kind of a 4 or 6 hour closure. And then, of course, follow that through with a 12-hour closure. Then we're looking for expansion down into some of these supports in between the higher time frame support and resistance zone there from October at 61,350 and that 58.8 at the monthly. If things did fall through that 58.8, as I've mentioned before, I know many are looking for the mean pullback somewhere in the upper $50,000 region, 56 to 58. That's really only going to become available if Bitcoin can stay in this zone on a daily close above 58.8. If it starts closing below on the daily timeframes, then I start looking for further downside somewhere around this weekly swing high from September of 2021 at 53K down to the $50,000 weekly closes from August and December of 2021. That was coming in at roughly 50,800 to 51.8. Now, Bitcoin did pit stop here on the daily time frame, and of course, you can see on the 12-hour time frame here, and held it as support after testing that $53,000 resistance, and then went on to make the new all-time highs. So, if Bitcoin does start to lose its local area, $65,000, I'm looking at primary support being 61,350 to 58.8. If that area is lost on a daily and higher term time frame, then and only then will I be looking down to some of those much deeper levels. That, of course, is not what we're seeing occur right now. Bitcoin is testing the top side of this, this consolidation area, which is $69,000 to $65,000. So let's go ahead and take a look at a few other things here on the 12-hour. First thing that we're going to look at is Stoke Momentum. This is a regular Stoke. Now, this is a paid indicator. I don't have any affiliation with the developers or team that made this, so you're not going to, I don't make any money off of this. I just really like this indicator, and I like supporting the developers over there at app.crowntrading.net. So I will name drop for just a moment. But it's there's other free indicators. I've shown them many times that have Stoke pivots. This just has extra bells and whistles like a DMI and ADX. Now, in this case, 62,300 is actually the momentum pivot, and we can see we have a fully confirmed cross back to the upside. We have a green dot as well down here indicating that Bitcoin has met the DMI conditions, but we still see that ADX is fairly weak, which is, your strength of trend stuff. Now, I'm not going to get into explaining this stuff. That's for maybe live streams or something like that, but this is still in the bearish control zone. I do need to see another closure or two, and Bitcoin starting to break above $69,000 to go test some of the areas to the upside that we just talked about, and then possibly get to the all-time highs and higher. This is looking pretty good on the 12-hour setup. We are seeing a bullish divergence play out here. This is a hidden bull div. Now, in this case, we've seen the first part of that move, and that was right back to $69,000, test the bottom side of this consolidation before breakdown to supports. So we need to see continuation above this area to go test the top side of the consolidation at minimum at 71.8 to 72, and then start testing the all-time high area around 73 to 73,835 and higher to 75 to 78 and so on and so forth. Now, as that relates to the daily, we can see that the daily is trapped in between the lower first. So that lower second standard deviation on the 12-hour is the lower first standard deviation of the Bollinger Bands on the daily. This is set up for a range. So Bitcoin is heading up and tested the overhead resistance here at $69,000. Previously, you had found it as resistance over here for quite a few days, almost a week. And if it does get above there, I would look again right to where the upper first is roughly on the 12-hour and the upper first is on the daily in this case. And that's somewhere around the $70,500 to $71,000 area, and then to the top side of this consolidation wick high around 71.8 to 72. Above there, Bitcoin needs to get closes above the upper second standard deviation around 72,700. Of course, that would put it right above the upper second around the 12-hour time frame as well, on the top side of this candle structure here before the push up to new all-time highs. Now, if Bitcoin can get above the upper second standard deviation at that $72,700 to $73,000 and then start closing above the all-time high, we're looking again towards that 75 to 78, and we're looking at expansion to the upside after consolidation. Now, the same thing goes for the downside here. If Bitcoin starts to get that 12-hour expansion to the downside below the lower second standard deviation, I'm looking right around this low side structure. Remember, that is around 72,250, 72,5 to around 73,800. Now, that just happens to line up with this big area here below this $65,000 level. If we see 64,500 dropped on like a 4 or 6 hour, I'm looking down to that lower second, which just so happens to come in around the middle part of that area at 62,750. So kind of splitting the difference between the wick low at 62,250 and the close open here at 73,800. Now, if Bitcoin, of course, does drop the lower second standard deviation and that wick low at 60 to 250 or so, then I'm looking for it to dip, of course, right back into that liquid area at the monthly close opens from October to March. That being, of course, again, 61,350, 258.8. That would be expansion to the downside right into support, and only if it met the conditions of breaking down from this wick low here at 59,225 to 58.8 would we be looking lower. So pretty exciting setup on the 12-hour that may lead into the daily. Now, one last thing that I'll leave you with here is the daily is still pointed down in terms of stoke momentum here. The pivot is at $71,000. I will give it some room because intraday, this number, if Bitcoin does push up, is going to be more around $71,000, which just so happens to line up with some of the important areas that we were just talking about to the upside if Bitcoin does get above 69K. The other thing that I wanted to note is we are now seeing that bullish divergence confirmed on the daily as well. This was the hidden bull div that we had talked about from that higher low structure. It also had that other lower low that it could have thrown bullish divergence if it did dip and hold above that lower low. Of course, there's bullish divergence all over the place. This is from that $50,000 weekly level. I'm sorry, this one is from the $50,000 weekly level. So it's got 2 points of connection here, the higher low, the $50,000 level, and it's not populating on this particular indicator here, but also from the 42.5 to $43,000 level as well. So I know those ones by heart. I don't really need to show them to you. I'll show them to you tomorrow on the live stream. You have a wonderful morning, afternoon, and evening, no matter where you are in the world. Please trade safe. And of course, as always, stay safe. With all of that being said, Landy out.